Hello, and welcome everybody to, according to Andrew, number 41, a Christian nationalist critique of libertarianism. So, I'm a fan of the Part of the Problem podcast, and something Dave Smith says all the time. Now, I'm obviously a small nobody, but he says, if you have solid critiques and stuff like that of libertarianism, let me hear them and stuff like that, and I will kind of respond to him and stuff like that. So this is kind of what I had written a while back on that, and I'm going to add some other stuff to it to maybe give a little bit more clarity, or maybe go a little bit more in depth. But yeah, that's going on there. Swift Fox Mark II, thank you for the follow. I very much appreciate it. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm going to do my best to give libertarianism its strongest arguments fairly. I'm going to try to steel man it and stuff like that. If you are a libertarian, you're listening to this, and you feel like I didn't do a fair job, let me know and let me know why. And maybe I'll try to craft it a little bit more, and maybe I'll do another video on this, maybe looking at some of those arguments and seeing if I can figure out where I fell short. So without further ado, let's kind of get into it. So libertarianism is the belief that self-ownership and property are the cornerstones of a civilized society, and that respecting those will lead to the non-aggression principle. This principle states that you are not allowed to aggress or commit violence against other individuals, and if someone does, you have the right to defend yourself. An extreme subgroup of libertarians are known as anarcho-capitalists. And in all honesty, it's more of a critique of anarcho-capitalists, but a critique of libertarianism sounded better. Who believe that the state and government are illegitimate because of their threat or initiation of violence on peaceful people to coerce things such as taxes out of the populace. Anarcho-capitalists believe every interaction when exchanging goods and services should be voluntary, and that unrestricted capitalism, the exchange of goods and services, will yield the most good for the most amount of people. To lay the foundation for a couple things, I would like to note that this analysis will be constructed on some of my assumptions when constructing this analysis. First, the principles laid out by anarcho-capitalists and libertarians must stand on their own. What that means is that they can't introduce any other system of morality or human nature or things like that into their system. Basically, they say these three principles are all that are needed to basically run a society. They don't they don't exclude people being able to have their religious preferences or whatever in society, but they basically say those aren't necessary for making the society function. They aren't a cornerstone of the society. That differs from my perspective, which is the Christian nationalist or Western civilization perspective, which is Western civilization is built on three cornerstones: the Greek philosophical tradition, the Roman tradition of law, and the Christian morality. And those three things are the pillars that build Western civilization. So their pillars are free trade, basically, non-aggression, and property rights. So those are the cornerstones of their philosophy. So let's see how they hold up. Where was I? So, to get into this a little bit more, so they believe in self-ownership. I just went over that. Civil and moral society in which liberty is maximized from capitalist growth and wealth, and a rising tide raises all ships theory. I want to delineate between possessions and estates. While both are property, most, if not all, non-aggression cases hold while speaking about possessions. But the same is not true when about estates, which will be expanded on further. And okay, well, I guess I'll explain it next. So basically, possessions are things like the cups and chairs and computer that you might own. Those physical objects that are very easy to understand. Whereas states and where the border of your estate and stuff like that is a much murkier and not as clear cut type thing. Um, you know, you might have a contract that says your estate ends at this line, and the other person might have a contract that says their estate ends at the other line. And that mentioning of contracts will get us into our next aspect in a second here. But I want to continue with what I had written. So let's look at the ideas of self-ownership, property rights, and the non-aggression principle, and see if we can find any examples that break it. So I'm going to kind of use the mathematician way of doing things. So in math, the way they do stuff, and this isn't perfect and stuff like that, but for this analogy, it'll work pretty well. So in math, a principle must be always true, and so it's much easier to disprove a theory than to prove a theory. So to disprove a theory, you simply have to show that it isn't true in one case. And to prove it is true, you have to show it's true in all cases. And so this is why you have this, you'll see this delineation and this argument between like what people can prove and not prove. And it's like, well, if you don't think that this is true or whatever, then prove like your theory is true and stuff like that. And it's like, that's not how it works. Like it's, and that's why it's really important to focus on the fact that your analysis isn't trying to make a statement of fact. It is making it is making a statement of fact, but it is making a statement of to show that the proposed theory does not stand, versus trying to present your own theory and saying that there is no counter arguments to said theory. Those are two very different things. So one of the places where this gets pretty dark pretty quickly is when it comes to children. So who, in theory, you can't own people, right? Here's the thing. You don't have a system of law. And that is your biggest and most important issue in this whole thing, is they try to claim that you can have a system without any laws, anarchy, and have a functioning system. Now, they don't actually believe this. And what I mean by that is there's a great line from Dave Smith that kind of highlights the fact that they don't really believe this in when he mentions that when two companies come together and they have basically contracts and agreements between each other, there's a whole bunch of complex issues that get litigated basically without the involvement of the government. And because these can be litigated without the involvement of the government, therefore we don't need the government to be the arbiter of laws and stuff like that. Which is fine and all, except for you've just created another law system, and simply removing the government system doesn't mean that that other law system will be in place. And on top of that, that law system and that ability for those two companies to come together and figure out a contract that's going to work requires the government system, even if it never gets involved. Because the simple fact that if they have an issue with this contract that they wrote out, and it can be the simple fact that it can be adjudicated, or there is a basically a appeals process to getting any dispute that they have with this contract and agreement that they came to, there's a way to dispute that requires government. And like, let's say the United States of American government goes poof overnight. All the law systems, all the governments are gone or whatever. Like, at the end of the day, you're still going to need a person that has final say and decision over these disputes. And there you go. You've just built another government again. So it's not possible. It's a vacuum that instantly gets filled the instant that it happens, unless you truly live in a lawless society where they're basically anything kind of rules and roosts. And even then, that's way too chaotic for people to actually survive in. I think to a certain extent, even animals kind of have rules. I don't know exactly what they are, but like, I guess it's more based on their biological functions and stuff like that. But, there is plenty of like animals getting attacked and stuff like that all the time. but they're not getting attacked nonstop, constantly, and all this other stuff. Anyway, that's a major divergence that isn't really adding to the whole thing. So you need to have laws, and that is the biggest issue that they run into. Um, so one of the easiest ways that this entire thing falls apart is with predators, right? Let's say that there is an 80-year-old man that who's a pedophile that wants to have sex with a minor. And first off, how do we define minor, right? That is because it's obvious when it's like 8 years old and 12 years old, and but like once you get to like 18, like, okay, like why is it 18, right? Could it be 17? Possibly. 16? Yeah, you're pushing it probably. 15, probably too young, but like 26, probably too old, right? But even then, like in Roman times, I believe you weren't fully, like they had a system where you're basically dependent on your parents until you were almost 30, I think. Maybe it was late 20s, like 26 or something like that. So, in that regard, you're not really you're still a minor until that point by Roman standards. But, and I don't think you get married till like you're 26. Same Sparta, same basic thing. You were very controlled, and you weren't allowed to get married till like you were 30 after you had gone through and done all your training, and they've gotten your best warfighting years out of you. And so, anyway, so like overall, like parental custody and how far that goes is something that needs to be answered. And it can't be, in one sense, you could have it answered on like an individual basis, right? Like some parents think that they're like, but okay, it can be answered on an individual basis, but we've seen kind of the horrors that leads to, because there are some not good parents out there. The primary example of this right now is child sex change stuff, right? Where they're trying to transition kids from being boys into girls, or girls into boys, and stuff like that. And it's like, that's super, like, in my opinion, that's child abuse. I think in most people's opinion, that would be child abuse. And there's no way to adjudicate, like, if the parents basically want to do that, if they're under the custody of the parents, they can basically do that. And there's nothing to really stop them, which is and that's basically what we live in right now, which is pretty messed up. But then because you're like, oh, well, that would be government interference. And it's like, okay, sure, but, we wouldn't have to have a law that says you can't murder people if everybody just followed the rules, right? Like, in the case that everybody's a good person and doesn't need to be told not to do very basic things, like, you don't need government, yes. But the fact is, we live in a society where, or not even a society, there are not good people that are willing to use violence and other means to get what they want. And so this is kind of the cornerstone of where the entire thing falls apart, is this idea that, well, we have this principle of non-aggression. So people won't aggress against each other. And it's like, sure, for like 99% of the population, that works. But it doesn't matter if it doesn't work for 99% of the population, because you only need that 1% to mess it up for everybody, right? Because the violent psychopaths that are in power right now, because of violence, are going to, like, the instant you get rid of them and make it so that you can't use violence or whatever, they don't care. And so they're going to use violence to get their stuff back, and put themselves back in power. And that seems like a world that I don't want to live in. And, like, because at least there's some checks and balances to making sure that, like, it's A, limited what the psychopaths in power can do, and then B, also has the ability to put non-psychopaths in power, to a certain extent. Politics is pretty dirty, but you might be able to not be that, or not get caught in that whole trap. So back to the kind of the original example. So some pedophile wants to pay a child money to have sex with them. Like, that's a free exchange of goods. Like, there is no way you can adjudicate that. And on top of that, you need an outside the parent just can't aggress and attack that person and say, no way, you're not doing this kind of thing. Like, that is a breaking of the non-aggression principle. Now, most people would say not really, like that this is like an okay time to use violence, and that's like kind of an interesting thing of like male patterns of behavior, I guess, is like in general, like male patterns of behavior do not comply with the non-aggression principle. Like males are in general violent with each other and like do violent things with each other, and like but it's all seen as like all good. Like, you know, you can go from like punching some dude in the face to like him being your best bro like 5 minutes later. Like uh you know, it's just a weird thing. Like one of my best friend that I've ever had, I think I've fought with him more, like physically fought with him more than any other person that I've ever known. Um, so it's a weird thing. Um, okay, so I got way off track on this. So I guess that's kind of the thing is like we're fit. The structure and the things around us that are set up by the government create this trestle. This basically it's the bones of our body, and you can't simply just remove the bones and remove all the structure and have the whole stand without it. Um, and so you need to even if it isn't a direct correlation, it's something that you need to realize does exist and is there. Another example that relates to like a military type situation is uh, the argument that cavalry and lancers and stuff like that in the uh, like Napoleonic era were basically useless, and cavalry were basically becoming obsolete, but they didn't get rid of them. And the truth of the matter is, just because the way they calculated this was basically on the amount of soldiers that they actually killed, but you also have to factor in the fact of what did they do that made it so that the enemy couldn't do other things, right? If you have uh, a if you have some cavalry up on a hill and you needed to go take that hill, maybe you decide, well, okay, we'll go take this other hill or do other things that play into your plan more just because of their presence there. And they don't necessarily need to get involved in the battle to make a change or an effect on the battle. Um, Again, I'm getting way too deep in the examples here, but let's kind of get back to what I was talking about. So their things are property rights, non-aggression principle, and free exchange of goods. Did I say that right? Hopefully. Um, so okay, so let's kind of continue with some of the points I made. So now let's go back to address an earlier statement that anarcho-capitalists cannot have laws. This ends up being somewhat of a catch-22, where either everyone is good and so you wouldn't need laws. This is kind of what I talked about earlier, as outlined previously. Evil exists and therefore are going to undermine or evil exists and are therefore going to undermine the non-aggression principle, right? The people that are going to commit violence don't care that you say you can't commit violence. Just like the people that say you can't commit murder don't care that there's a law for murder on the books. The law is there so that if they commit murder, we can remove them from society, basically. This can be undermined in two ways. Either an apparatus needs to exist to bring people who violate this principle to justice, thus creating a justice system with a police force, or you are on your own to enact justice. If someone breaks the non-aggression principle and therefore and there is a justice system to arbitrate these matters, then there must be a system to bring that person into a court. Uh, if they refuse to come voluntarily, which since they are already breaking the law can be assumed, thus it would be necessary to have some form of bounty hunter or police to track down the fugitive people who are disrupting society. Whoa, need to flip the page here. This creates an interesting dilemma, however, as now you are authorizing someone to use force against another that hasn't aggressed upon them, specifically, who hasn't aggressed upon them specifically, which breaks the non-aggression principle on the one-to-one interaction basis, because this person has this person that is now going to commit violence against this other person did not was not aggressed upon directly, but is aggressing upon this person on behalf of another person. However, it is not impossible to potentially have a system that works this way and still have the principle hold, though I think the argument wouldn't be too strong. The biggest problem you run into with this is the cycle of revenge. If the bounty hunter or police get the wrong person, since both sides will feel justified in using force at the moment of the incident, its probability that things escalate to violence is not trivial. So what I mean by that, because that wasn't very well articulated, is if the bounty hunter is going after someone and they're given a description of who this person is, and they go to apprehend someone and it's the wrong person, right? Both the bounty hunter / police are going to try to apprehend this person, and this person is going to feel like they're being aggressed upon because they're like, why is this person attacking me? I haven't done anything wrong. So now you have this person that's authorized to go aggress upon the person who had aggressed someone else, but they got the wrong person. Sure, the bounty hunter is in fault at the end of the day in this situation, but at the moment they can't know that. And the other person is being aggressed upon by someone who, by all accounts, they shouldn't have been aggressed upon, and therefore they have the right to use violence. To properly arbitrate this issue will require quite the bureaucratic system, which, voluntary or not, creates issues, as it then is a point in which power will be concentrated, and slowly over time, the monopolization of force. The way this would be countered is a decentralized system, which is what libertarians are all for. However, such a system would need to be so fractal to prevent consolidation of power as to have no authority at all. Let's look at another case. That of you being your own established justice. The first issue this creates is a Wild West system of vigilante justice, which is anything but peaceful. Then, of course, people being on their own to such a degree that any small band of people could come together and, in classic warlords style, start taking everyone's stuff by force. One might argue that others will come together to defense of your fellow man. Okay, I'll get to that in a second, but I want to expound on this vigilante system. So basically, you have somebody that comes and takes your stuff, and now it's completely on you to go and find that person, track them down, take your stuff back, violence or whatever, and that is the system, right? So, again, you have the chance for people being confused, and again, you have this issue of, and then, as I will get into, you have the issue of people being so fractalized that they're not in a actual society. They're their own king on their own quarter acre, right? And so it just you have things to such a fractured degree that just doesn't work. So as we were going, course to do world stuff. So okay, so then the other issue is now people are so fractured and divided that the group of people that aren't going to listen to the laws are going to band together, because now they have a concentration of force that is going to be able to overwhelm the other people. And as I pointed out, you could get your other fellow neighbors to join together in a common defense, but now we're starting to have a military looking thing. And I get it's more of a militia that we have in the United States and stuff like that, but this stuff always develops into a more sophisticated, more privatized type system. Okay, so tight-knit communities, but the instant it resembles anything like a small army, it's over. To illustrate this point, there are historical accounts of the Duke of Wellington trying to raise Spanish troops to fight Napoleon's invasion of the Iberian Peninsula, which is where Spain is. The army was literally in the next town over, but these people couldn't be bothered because it didn't directly affect them. The philosophy of individualism that libertarians instill does all the work a conquering army needs to divide the people, and a house divided cannot stand. Basically, this idea that you are your own person and like you don't need anybody else, it already sets up the system for divide and conquer and atomization that any army would need to walk in and just take over the entire place. Um, so that covers the internal threat to non-aggression. Let's look at the external. Again, as just stated, your society is already atomized, so it would be easy to conquer. It would be easy to conquer. So the only possible way the country doesn't get conquered is this philosophy is practiced by the whole world. Or, for lack of a better term, there is a one world government. Obviously, this is what the elites and communists have been trying to make happen forever because the desire for power knows no bounds. And, of course, the one world government also presupposes that there are no nations, which is not the case. This is the main reason why free trade does not work. Oh my gosh, I made a lot of jumps here. Uh, okay, so basically, there. So you have basically you have this group that says, okay, we're not gonna not aggress against people. Well, the people next door that have a military can easily come in and roll over you. Okay, so now we need our neighbors to not be. Well, they have neighbors, and they have neighbors, and eventually it gets to the point where, for this system to work, you need everybody to be doing it, and everybody to be so atomized across the entire world for it to function. Well, we know one world governments don't work. Every single time they push for it, it collapses in on itself immediately afterwards because it's the Tower of Babel, right? They're trying to reach the heavens, and due to their hubris, it always collapses. um, where was I? So, and also it denies the fact that there are groups of people that have a unique national identity, that is unique to them, right? There's a different culture uh, and language and religion and people that make up this nation, and that you can't just treat them like you treat everyone else. This is why the American efforts to democratize the world have been an absolute disaster. Some people don't want democracy, or even a republic, and debatably, they're bad systems. But that's a different video. Uh, so, so, and to add to the nation. So, a nation is a group of people that are connected by blood, language, religion, culture, and tradition. A simple way to think of it is that is the farthest out group of the family. This, along with labor as a community that is part of free trade equation, never factored in. I don't know what I was talking about here. Okay, so that kind of covers that. Basically, to summarize, because I kind of went all over the place with this. So, okay, in summary, you to create a libertarian system, you need to not have any laws. To not have any laws means that you can't enforce a non-aggression principle. If you want to enforce a non-aggression principle, you have to have laws. Those laws then, to be enforced, have to in some way kind of violate your non-aggression principle. Therefore, it is not a complete or it has flaws. And the main flaw is that of human nature. That even though generally people are good and try to be good to each other, you will always have those group of people that don't want to be good and don't want to be good to people, and their only concern is that those of the worldly things. And if you don't have things in place to structure your society that seek for otherworldly things, your entire system collapses. The idea of the non-aggression principle is like the idea that Caesar shouldn't cross the Rubicon with a legion because nobody's ever done it before, and therefore you shouldn't do it. Well, eventually someone in the system is going to ask why. And when they ask why, the entire thing collapses. Because at the end of the day, it's because we said so. And that is a very, very flimsy way to argue this thing. Now, in a certain extent, that is how almost all morality systems work. At the end of the day, it comes down to because we said so. But the difference is who said so. And when it comes to morality systems in religions, I'll use Christianity for example, the because we said so is God, right? And I get that there's a lot of other layers on top of that where maybe it's the Pope or some other issues, or it's been extrapolated based off of things that are in the Bible, and therefore there's more question to it and more interpretation there, and we look through a lens darkly. But at the end of the day, the idea that God says it, and He's the one, the unmoved mover that is outside the system, and the one that makes the judgment in the final days, is a much stronger motivation for doing the right thing and following actual morality than the simple idea that you shouldn't aggress against other people. That's probably what I just should have said at the beginning. But hopefully that kind of explains some of those ideas. This one was a little rambly, and I apologize for that. But hopefully you got some ideas out of that. It was at least slightly coherent, and yeah, hopefully you guys have a good day. Please like, share, subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube or BitChute or Podbean. That's where I mainly have, or that's where I have stuff right now. If there's a place that you would like it to expand to, where it's like, oh, I'd really like to get this on like Apple Podcasts or something, I can look into making that happen. Just let me know where you think I should expand to next in terms of places to get podcasts and stuff, and I will see if I can make it happen. Anyway, hopefully you guys are all having a good day. This has been According to Andrew, and I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Goodbye.